Good morning. Welcome to our Live and Learn faculty presentations hosted by the University of Oregon's Pre-College Summer Academy to Inspire Learning program. We are also commonly referred to as the SAIL program. I'm Laura Fernandez, the Executive Director for SAIL, and we serve middle and high school students in their pursuit of higher education. We are honored and excited today to be discussing law and debate, featuring Professor Tom Leininger from the University of Oregon's Law School and Noah, who Tom will present in a moment. Professor Leininger grew up in Southern Oregon, so he's an Oregonian. He's earned his undergraduate degree from Yale and his law degree from Harvard. He's worked as a federal prosecutor, as counsel on a subcommittee for the U.S. Senate, and as in litigation attorney in San Francisco. Professor Leininger joined the university in 2003. So we are very honored to have you with us today, Professor Leininger. Participants, if any of you have any questions throughout this presentation, please put them in chat. I know our presenters are hoping to engage you in some of their debate, so please don't hold back, and they will get to you as soon as possible. We hope you enjoy our presentation today, and welcome to you, Professor Leininger and Noah.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Laura, and thank you for your great leadership of the SAIL program. As Laura mentioned, this is the Summer Academy to Inspire Learning, but it's the spring now. Today is March 10th, so we can still use the SAIL acronym. It's the Spring Academy to Inspire Learning. I am presenting today about things that I teach here at the University of Oregon. We're going to discuss law, which is a subject of study. We're also going to discuss debate, which is an activity that people do in college, and I'm sure many of you already do it in high school. I wanted to make sure you realize how accessible these two things are, that a high school student can be conversant in law, that a high school student could be an excellent debater. So I'm inviting to join me a high school junior who's a veteran of our SAIL program. She was involved in one of our live sessions back in 2019. And her name is Noah, and Noah is in the screen below me. We're going to both take part in this presentation, and I'll lead off by explaining a bit about the law and how the University of Oregon teaches law and debate. But then I'm going to involve Noah, and we have 3 stages for our discussion, our 1-hour discussion today. First, I will lay out some basics about law and debate. Then I'm going to introduce a topic that I think a lot of you will find interesting. It's the Brianna Taylor case and a recent bill to limit political protests in Kentucky after the Brianna Taylor shooting. And then Noah and I are going to debate, and this is going to be an interactive presentation where we're basically your avatars. It's like a video game where you control Tom and you control Noah. And what we need you to do is send us in the chat arguments to make. And Noah is great. She's really good at thinking on her feet. And so she's going to have probably the better side of this debate. She's going to say the bill is a bad idea because I'm the host. I'll take the more difficult side of this debate and I'll say the bill's a good idea. Let's start at the top. We're learning today about law and about debate. We have a law school at the University of Oregon that primarily educates people who've graduated from college. It's a 3-year program in most circumstances. And during those 3 years, you learn how to argue in court or how to do other law-related tasks. Some people learn to be law enforcement officers. Some people learn to advocate for policy changes relating to law. Some people learn to become judges. And you may already know from watching TV or from just reading the newspaper that being a lawyer is a decent job. It's a job that gives you a lot of versatility. You can practice in a city of any size, depending on the realm of law you choose. It could be a lucrative profession, but it's always going to get you a steady paycheck. What I like most about it is that lawyers can act when they see social injustice. Lawyers don't have to sit on the sidelines. Lawyers have a skill set that allows them to stand up for what they believe is right. And as I teach sales students, typically that's the part of this profession that interests them. Now, when you go to college, depending which college you choose, you can take law-related classes the moment you arrive. In college, you can take them as a freshman. In fact, I've taught freshman law at the University of Oregon. And even schools that don't have a law school, colleges in Oregon sometimes offer subjects like criminology or political science that focuses on what the courts do. Now, debate is an extracurricular activity. Some of you may be doing that in high school. NOAA actually helps to teach debate to middle schoolers. And so I know there are some middle schoolers around the state who've already learned about debate. And NOAA and I, at a little later stage, are going to explain what people do to be successful in debate. But it is an activity in college. Some people compete in national debate tournaments. Some people choose to compete in something called mock trial, where they simulate what lawyers and witnesses do in the courtroom. Very exciting. Okay, so today, Noah and I are going to address a controversial topic, and we want to make sure that all the students and teachers know what's on the agenda today. Now, I used to teach debate to sales students, and I think Noah remembers some of this. We used to queue up these goofy topics like, what's better, dogs or cats? What's better, pie or cake? And, you know, I mean, that's fine. You learn the skills of debaters. But we found that when we asked the students in SAIL what they wanted to debate, our students wanted to debate very serious subjects like racial justice, like capital punishment, meaning the death penalty, like limits on freedom of speech, like school discipline. So today I selected a topic for us that relates to the Brianna Taylor case. I'll explain it a bit. I'm going to show some photographs, but my presentation will focus more on the protests that followed. So don't worry that you're going to see gruesome photographs, but this is a sad story, and it's one that you need to know about before we dive into our exercise. And I'm kind of saving the part that involves Noah because chat has a delay. And so while the chat is coming in, Noah and I are going to talk about how to be good debaters. So let's share the screen, and I want you to see some photographs as I describe what happened in the Brianna Taylor case. All right, let me start this slideshow. This is Brianna Taylor. Brianna Taylor was a bright and talented young woman who died at age 26. This is a drawing of her, and this is a photograph of her when she graduated from an emergency tech program. In other words, in the city of Louisville, where she lives, she received a degree to assist in emergency rooms. She'd already been working as an EMT, a first responder to emergencies. By all accounts, a wonderful human being, a person who is innocent of any crime. And what happened, I'll mention briefly, is approximately 1 year ago today, on March 13th, 2020, police executed a search warrant at a home that she shared with a man named Kenneth Walker. And police believed they had probable cause to think that Kenneth Walker might have drugs. Now, police got authorization for what's called a no-knock warrant, where they did not knock and announce that they were at the door. They were not required to pause and let the homeowners come to the door. Instead, they knocked the door down and came into that apartment, guns blazing. And it was pursuant to what's called a no-knock warrant. At that time in Kentucky, it was possible to get a warrant where you don't have to knock and give the homeowner time to come to the door. Well, there's some dispute about whether police announced that they were police. What happened next is that Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend, fired a shot. Police responded, and the shot hit one of the officers in the leg, the evidence indicates. Police responded by firing 32 shots. And one of those shots, in fact, perhaps several of those shots, hit Brianna Taylor and killed her. And this case became very controversial because a lot of people were concerned about the use of no-knock warrants. A lot of people thought that there was racial prejudice involved in the particular way they approached this apparently nonviolent criminal. And we won't get into those details so much today. What's really important to know is that the authorities decided not to indict those police officers, except one of the officers was charged with the crime of firing a gun recklessly and hitting in the direction of a neighbor's apartment. And as LeBron James said, the neighbor's wall got justice, but Brianna Taylor did not get justice. This has become a very important cause throughout the country. A lot of people want to use this case to recognize racial injustice and to change the law. So for example, to eliminate these no-knock warrants. Well, in Louisville, the protest that ensued caused a lot of outrage among the protesters and also among those who believe the police are right and the police deserve more support. Now, Noah and I are going to debate this law. It's a recent proposal. Maybe I deleted the language here. I'll bring it up later. A legal proposal was brought to make it harder to protest. Noah and I are going to argue whether that law is a good idea. The basic idea of the law is that people shouldn't be allowed to say things that are offensive to police during protests. People should not be allowed to wave signs that police might deem to be offensive or disrespectful. We'll debate whether that's a good idea. Here's what the protest looked like. It was largely African-American, but also, supporters who would confront police, shout at police, use chants like no peace, no justice, no justice, no peace. And I'll show you a few videos. And they would accuse the police of being racist. Here's an example of a sign. Dear police, when can we sleep, walk, drive without getting killed? And here's, it's not all African-American people. A wide range of citizens in Louisville were outraged by this conduct. These signs, you can't really see that one, but it's saying police shouldn't have immunity for accountability for these crimes. Here's one that says, Brianna Taylor, 8 bullets, arrest, prosecute, convict, referring to the police. Here's one that says, stop killing Black people. They confronted a Kentucky senator in Washington, D.C. with signs that said, stop killing us. And then this was part of the effort to defund police altogether, demilitarize police, take away certain tools that law enforcement uses. All right, I'm just going to play very briefly a video so you can get a sense of what the protests were all about. I'll stop there because I want to move on to the next phase. Hold on, let me just cut that off. I think we're done. All right then. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to present you with the language of this bill, and I want you to help Noah and me debate about it. I need your chat about whether you think this bill is a good idea. We're going to continue to 12:45 today. By sending a chat message, you're not going to be recognized, you're not going to be identified, but what you're doing is equipping Noah and me to make arguments on either side. We welcome any points you want to make, but it is going to take about 5 minutes for your chat to be processed. So what I want to do now is put up the language of the bill, but the minute you see this, you can share with us what your thoughts are. And just in an abundance of caution, I'm also involving the Springfield debate team that I coach to make sure we have some comments in case it takes a while to prime the pump here. Here's the bill. Any person who uses language, displays a sign, or makes a gesture that a reasonable police officer would find to be offensive or insulting commits a crime, which is called a misdemeanor in this case, and the authors of the bill said it should be punishable by a fine and also loss of all public benefits by up to 3 months. Now, just to be clear, I modified this bill a bit to make it better for debate, but it's surprisingly similar to what I put here. I made it shorter. Yes.
Make that a little larger.
I certainly can. That's a good idea. I'll make that larger. Let me enlarge it to a bigger size. Let's make that this big. Did that help?
No.
That didn't seem to help. Let's see if I can zoom in more. 500. Oh, that's big.
There we
How
go.
we doing? That look better?
Yes. Now we only see part of it.
Well, I'm going to make this work.
Make your.
I think I need a number for enlargement that is not so big. So what do we think about that? Is that helping or is that not big enough?
Not much. If you just go to the top right-hand corner of your screen, can you just make it a full screen? That might do it.
Tell you what, I think I have one last thing I can do here.
And if not, that's okay.
I think I can pick a number. I'm not familiar with the function you're talking about. Isn't there a way I can? So what do you want to do? Full screen? Where do you see that? Here?
Yes, right there.
Ah, I hit that, but nothing seems to have happened. Tell you what, I will make these words bigger, and that's going to solve the problem. That's going to be a workaround. I'm going to make these words 20 point. Now these words are going to be bigger. Look at that.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Thank you.
We welcome suggestions. Suggestions always improve a presentation. So I need you to start thinking about what's good or what's bad with this language. And we're encouraging people to share their thoughts by chat. Laura, is there any guidance you need to give so people know how to share thoughts by chat?
No.
Pretty straightforward?
They know how to chat. Yes.
Yes, probably better at chatting than we are. Okay, so now I want to give you the legal framework for analyzing a bill. And while your comments come in, we are going to discuss the legal framework, and then we're also, Noah and I are going to discuss how you debate successfully. It seems like that would be a good skill set to know. So here are some considerations that lawyers think about when anybody proposes a criminal statute. We think about the following. Does this bill address a real harm? So Noah and I are going to have to argue whether it's necessary to protect police from hurt feelings, or whether this bill actually addresses a more serious harm. But normally we don't have criminal penalties unless there's a very significant harm. And I'd like your thoughts about whether what we see here is a significant harm. I've already got some chat coming in. This is great. Thank you. Please continue with more chat. That's the fuel we need for our debate. You can talk about whatever interests you, but let me show you another consideration that lawyers sometimes think about. And that is, does the bill violate constitutional rights? I want you to think about whether any aspect of this bill would constrain the freedoms we enjoy under the Bill of Rights. Think about the First Amendment. Is there a right to protest? Is there a right to speak your mind about topics that may make a government official uncomfortable? So think about those two. I'm going to enlarge these so they're even easier for you to see. I appreciate that comment by Laura. So now there are two things in your toolkit, but we're going to have even more. Let me get a bigger font. No, that didn't work. Okay, next up. Is the bill vague or is it clear? And what we want to worry about here is whether citizens are put on notice about what's out of bounds. Ooh, I've got really good comments coming in. I love these comments. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to work with students who make such comments. So I'm trying to make this larger, and I think I'll just describe it. Does the bill set clear boundaries for citizens? One way that bills are unconstitutional is if they're vague, is if the bill does not let the citizens know what conduct is out of bounds. Now, what do you think? When you see this language, do you think it's very clear what a police officer would find offensive? If it's vague, we have problems. So I think that's definitely something you want to think about. Let's keep going. Another consideration is, does the bill set boundaries for police so that they know whom to arrest, right? If the bill gives police a lot of discretion, oh, I'm getting great comments. Thank you so much for these great comments. If the bill allows police to use a lot of discretion, then they may be discriminatory in their application of the law. They may use it against people who look different from them. They may use it against people they don't like. Now, here's another point that you need to consider. And, you know, looks like so far all the comments are coming in Noah's favor, but you could help me out too. I've got to defend this law. I want to make sure people know we're thinking about what we call ancillary effects of the bill. Does the bill discourage activity that's beneficial? Could you argue these protests that include some harsh language, are they beneficial to society? If a bill chills conduct that we consider to be beneficial to society, that's a cost we want to worry about, right? And that's a reason why we should be wary of the bill. Just enlarge my screen so you can see all the words. Just a few more thoughts that you should bear in mind. Here's one. Is the penalty too great? Now, one thing that I think a wise lawyer would consider is, does the punishment match the crime? And recall that the authors of this bill want to take away a family's benefits, all public benefits, housing, welfare benefits, medical benefits, for a 3-month period if a member of the household participates in a disrespectful protest. Now, one last consideration, and of course you can use whatever considerations you want. One last consideration is, does the bill send the right signal to society? Now, the signaling effect of law is something we study in law school. And we wonder whether the law sends a good message. Sometimes legislators pick a particular approach where their goal is to signal, we support one side. Now, here you might say it's important for legislators to signal their support for police, or you might say during this difficult time, it's important for legislators to signal their support for communities that feel threatened by police. Finally, we'll take any additional arguments you want to make. Because there's a 5-minute delay, I want to talk with Noah a bit about how people debate effectively. But during this time, keep sending us your arguments. You are really sending us some great arguments. I want to thank everyone who's participated so far, and I'm trying to get more. Thanks so much. So Noah, while people think about this bill, and I'll leave the language right here for you to see. Maybe I'll need to shrink it up just a bit because now it's too big for the screen. I want to leave this language up here for everyone to see. And Noah, I want to ask you, what makes a debater effective? May I ask generally, what are some things that you recommend to make a debater as effective as possible? What would you put on that list, Noah?
I think a lot of things go into effective debating. I think the two main things are body language and also how you are speaking. And it's really important to make sure that you try and limit the amount of filler words you use because that conveys a lot more confidence. And also with your body language, it's really important to, when you're standing for a debate, to make sure that you appear confident, that you're not fidgeting, things like that, that make sure that you come across like you know what you're talking about.
Well, let's talk about what's effective body language. I know I've watched you debate, and I know you're quite good at this, and you may not be able to show off the full range of gestures and body language because we're on Zoom. But what sort of things do debaters use, as far as hand gestures, facial expressions, to maximize the effectiveness of their presentations?
Yeah, hand gestures are definitely a big one. A lot of people like to speak with their hands, do things like this that really help carry across an impact and make it very clear that you're speaking about something that you're passionate about. And then making sure that you're standing in a very confident position, an open position. And yeah, I think hand gestures are in particular a big one. And I know a lot of debaters use hand gestures very confidently and actively.
What would be a good example of a hand gesture that enhances one's presentation?
A few that people use a lot are things like this, like counting on their fingers or going like that with their hands. Speaking with your hands is important in debate.
And you're trying to emphasize, aren't you, with those hand gestures? So what would you want to emphasize with your counting or with your waving? What would you emphasize? Would you just do it constantly or limit it to certain circumstances?
Definitely limit it to the main points. You want to make sure that you're emphasizing the most important and impactful points of your speech.
I agree. Well, let's keep going. And I want to ask about substantive tips you might have. Sorry about that. You mentioned that there are ways that debaters choose their words effectively and make it easier for the audience to get their points. What would you put under that category? How do you, counsel debaters as far as their substantive message?
Well, I think that a lot of that comes into how you're formatting your speech, making sure that you end with the most important impact or you summarize your points and you go in a clear and concise order is really important, since that helps people who are listening to be able to follow along on your speech.
Why should we be concise? What if we have something we think is really important? Shouldn't we go on and on to really draw attention to that point? Why is it important to be concise, which means brief?
Because you want to make sure that people come across with a very clear impact, that they know exactly what your main points are and what the impact of your speech is. And that's really important. If you go on and on, it can drag out your point and it doesn't make it that clear what the biggest impact is.
And we have a question on our chat that I wanted to pose to you. You mentioned an open stance and the importance of posture. That may not be such an issue when you and I debate today, but what do you mean? What's the kind of body position that makes one an effective debater?
Definitely standing straight, looking at who you're speaking to, making sure that you have good posture, that you are not fidgeting, and that you're making eye contact is another big one. Looking at the wall or looking at your feet often isn't the best way to give a speech. So making sure that you're looking at the person you're talking to, standing straight up, things like that.
You're doing great. And we have a lot of good comments coming in. So I don't want to drag out this part very long, but I just wanted to ask, what do you do with your voice? Now, I could make my voice much louder. I could make it loud throughout my debate. Is that a good idea?
I think, in my opinion, making your voice show inflection and maybe speaking louder for the more important points, and on the things that are more explanation or filler, you can slow down a little bit or talk a little bit softer, but making sure that you emphasize with your voice is another big one.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that explanation. Our students have given us a lot to work with. Now, recall, I'm getting input both from chat, people who are watching this broadcast right now, also directly from Springfield debaters. And that's a team here in Lane County that includes a lot of SAIL graduates. And the Springfield debaters shared some thoughts, and we actually have some good input all over the spectrum. What I want to do now, Noah, is put up some of the comments that I've received and put them into this outline, because most of the comments are going to fit in this outline. And this will allow you and I to have some grist for the mill, as we say. We're going to have some arguments to make pro and con. So I'm going to enlarge these points. I want to make sure Laura really helped by letting us know we need some extra space here. So I'm going to use 20-point font. If anybody would like more clarification, just let us know. The first issue that we want to talk about is whether the bill addresses a real harm. Are the protesters who yell at police causing a harm that justifies criminal penalties? Well, there aren't as many points from students in support of my side, but I did get one comment that I found helpful, that protests lead to violence. And I'm summarizing the comment, but the idea is perhaps a bill that nips protests in the bud, a bill that prevents them from spiraling out of control, might protect society, because certain comments signal violence is imminent. Now, I must say the majority of people came out on Noah's side. So Noah, you're going to have more to work with than I will on this first point. Here's what people said on Noah's side. They made the point that police should have thick skin. Look, if your job entails dealing with dangerous armed criminals, is it reasonable to expect that everyone you interact with will refrain from hurting your feelings? I think that's a very powerful point. I also, this one is what we call a turnaround in the world of debate. Sometimes a point is so good that it turns the opposing party's arguments around. And here the point is suppression of peaceful protest may lead to violence. Hey, do you want to help me unpack that one, Noah? I've been doing a lot of the talking here. Why do you suppose a student had commented that if police forbid even disrespectful language, that might actually kind of ironically lead to greater harm, greater frustration, and violent protest? How do you think that might have any merit?
Well, I think that we've been able to see this in the past a little bit with protests, just that when people feel like the peaceful protest isn't working, that's what makes them feel like they need to resort to more violent and impactful um, ways of protesting. So I think that suppressing peaceful protest will lead to more violent protesting, and because that's what people will think is the impactful form of protesting.
Well, thank you to the student who suggested that. We also have a student who's the child of a police officer on my debate team. And so my debate team at Springfield High School is maybe a little more sensitive to some of the difficulties police face, I suppose. But I heard the comment that people won't want to become police officers. If being a police officer is such an ordeal that we won't attract some of the most talented, and middle of the road, just people to join that profession, it may make us all worse off. All right, let's now get to the issue of constitutional rights. We got some really good comments on constitutional rights, and most of them came in for Noah on this point. Noah, I think the students have your back. I think they're less concerned about me, apparently. I think you got the most support here. So the first thing people are saying about constitutional rights is that people should not need to depend on police to approve their speech. Help me understand that point, Noah. You're going to have to work with this. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's wrong for police to have a censorship power with respect to political speech?
Well, we have our amendment rights that allow us to speak freely, and I think giving the police the power to limit that, specifically when it's things and speaking out against police violence and things that the police are doing that the public doesn't agree with, is direct censorship, and that's not constitutional.
Now, one thing we do in debate is we think about impacts. We think about what might happen if we permitted such an encroachment on the freedom of expression. Maybe not in this context, but what we call slippery slope. Maybe we might see erosion of liberties in other areas. Could you develop that argument a little bit?
Yeah, I think exactly what you said. It's a slippery slope. And if we start by limiting certain areas of speech, that could lead to people using other areas of speech to express themselves and limiting that. And it's a slippery slope to having very censored speech.
Well said. Now, I am not getting a lot of support on the First Amendment. I think that the class is kind of rooting for you. But the argument that all think about making is that not all speech is protected. And speech that consists of inciting violence is not protected by the First Amendment. Now, Noah's going to have something to say here, because the language that people were using that we saw in the video and in the photos, that was not necessarily inciting violence. So this could be a weak point for me. All right, I think we got the most input from students on this point. Is the bill clear or is it vague? and students thought it was vague. And I, never underestimate sales students. This is a really good point. And Noah, what's the problem with vague bills? Why is it a problem if citizens can't see the boundaries for their conduct?
I think that it makes it very subjective. So it really comes down to what the police find offense from and take offense from. So that makes it very difficult for the public to figure out what is actually legal and what isn't legal, what they are allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say.
Well, let's have a look at the bill. I agree, you're making good points, but let's have a look at the bill. The bill says anyone who uses language, displays a sign, or makes a gesture that a reasonable officer would find offensive or insulting. You don't take comfort in the fact that we use a reasonable police officer standard here?
I think that is a very subjective standard, and it really leaves it up to the police officers to say what they take insult from.
One of the things,
difficult.
no, you go on, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of the things I tell my law students is the more a bill or law uses the phrase reasonable, the more it tends to be unreasonable and hard to find the boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think Noah's got a good point. I would not know if I were walking into a protest, I would not know what the limits are because it depends on how an officer might react, right? Now, on my side, I'll be able to say, I suppose, and again, the students weren't really rooting for me on this point, but I suppose I could say, we all know it's offensive, right? I mean, I bet very few of us get in trouble for offensive speech at school. We know what kind of comments a teacher might find offensive. And the reasonable person standard in any event is going to prevent a hypersensitive officer from abusing this statute. That's going to be my point. We've kind of already covered number 4. Noah mentioned that if there aren't clear boundaries, then police can use their subjective judgment. It might be discretionary. I think that we're getting close to debate time, so I'm going to skip ahead to the next point where students made comments. And here I got a lot of comments that were on Noah's side. People were concerned about the penalty being disproportionate. And the crime doesn't fit the penalty was an argument I heard from 2 people. Tell me what you think about that, Noah. Do you think that you'll be able to make the argument that the crime doesn't fit the penalty?
Yeah, I think that we can weigh the impacts between the crime and the punishment. We can say that the punishment, taking away someone's benefits for 3 months that they rely on, that they might help support their family with, is a lot greater than insulting a police officer's feelings one time. I think that we can see that.
You present it in a compelling way. On my side, I'll have to redefine the harm, right? I mean, when you weigh harm versus benefit, the whole game is defining the harm in a way that suits your side. I'll have to define the harm as avoiding riots, right? Avoiding violence. Now, let me work on my typing here. Avoiding violence is important. And now I've got to avoid misspelling. So let me get rid of that N. Avoiding violence is important. And harm to families deters misconduct. So what I'll argue is the severe penalty is necessary to get people's attention. Now that ends the outlining part. And I want to put Noah and me on the screen now. Your comments will still be welcome. But we got some good comments from the crowd. And Noah and I are now going to debate. While we debate, we will highlight our best points. And the way we're going to set this up is usually the person who wants the proposal goes first, and the person who opposes the proposal goes second. I want to preface this presentation by telling you I don't necessarily agree with what I'm about to say. A lot of times lawyers practice both sides, and that makes you better as an advocate on the side that you like the most, right? I also want to make clear Noah is not necessarily expressing her views, because both of us are really trying our best to articulate the comments received from students in the audience and students on the Springfield debate team. I will go first. My name is Tom Leininger, and today I will argue that the Kentucky legislature should create new criminal penalties for speech during protests, for gestures during protests, and for the use of signs during protests that would cause a reasonable officer to be offended or to feel insulted. And I will also argue that the penalty for this offense should not only be a fine, but should be taking away the benefits received by the household of the violator for a period of 3 months. That refers to all public benefits. And I'm going to offer 4 reasons for this bill. My first reason is that disrespectful speech causes very significant harm. Now, I believe my opponent's going to focus on the hurt feelings of police officers. I'd like to widen the focus so that you think about the risk of violence. And here in Oregon, we've seen that riots can cause serious property damage. We know that riots in some states, including Kentucky, have led to violence against protesters and shooting of police officers, even in Kentucky. And my argument is officers will use this bill to shut down a protest before it spirals out of control. Officers, based on their training and experience, will be able to recognize when certain comments signal that violence is imminent. And so I believe that what we're going to gain is better safety on the streets. There's a second reason why this bill is a good idea. It promotes public respect for law enforcement. Now, the reality in the United States is that lately, a lot of communities distrust the police. My position is that if it were not possible to speak disrespectfully in public about the police, that would improve the view of all of society about the legitimacy of law enforcement. And when police have respect, it is less likely they'll need to resort to violence. My third point is that the bill does not limit any worthwhile speech protected by the First Amendment. Now, the First Amendment does indeed protect freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. But when you see a sign that says awful things about a police officer, when you see a sign that says police should be prosecuted, when only a tiny subset of police have actually done something wrong, that speech is what we call incendiary. That speech invites a riot. And it's well settled that speech that incites violence is not protected by the First Amendment. You can't go to a crowded movie theater. Of course, there aren't any of those anymore. You can't go to a crowded movie theater and yell fire, because if you did, you would cause people to run to the exits and trample all over each other, and your First Amendment rights don't extend that far. Now, the final point I want to make is that we need to signal support for police during this difficult time. In the last year, since the George Floyd murder, we've come to realize that a percentage of the police are guilty of misconduct, but the vast majority of police are doing a hard job for which they need our support. What the Kentucky legislature should do is take a stand and should signal that we generally back police except for those who do something wrong. That tiny subset can't besmirch the reputation of all police officers. And for all these reasons, I respectfully urge that the Kentucky legislators pass the bill. And once again, I want to qualify this by saying I'm just playing a role here. And now I introduce Noah Ablo Mazel, a high school junior. And you get a vote. all of you by chat get a vote on which side you find more compelling. And afterward, Noah and I will sort of Monday morning quarterback and see what we did well and what we did wrong. And I want to see what students' feedback is too. Noah, take it away.
Hello, my name is Noah Abelmazel, and I will be explaining why I believe that we should not create this new penalty that in this proposed bill from Kentucky. And I will be proposing 5 points, and then I will respond to Tom's points. My first point is that the bill doesn't address real harm, and that it is very subjective, and it is open to subjectivity, and that the police shouldn't be so sensitive to such speech. Police are responsible for protecting the public. They're signing up for a job that is putting them in the line of fire and putting them in this line of violence. And if we are making new laws that'll protect police from getting their feelings hurt, I think that goes against the core values of the police, since they're meant to be protecting the public. And my second point is that the First Amendment gives protesters the right to speech. So we have an amendment right to express our opinions and express our views publicly. And allowing this law to be put into practice, allowing this bill to be put into practice, is a slippery slope to reducing the right to speech in many different areas. Starting here, we are reducing the amount of speech that people can have in a protest setting, and that can lead people to turn to other ways of expressing themselves, and in turn limiting their expression in many other ways. And my next point is that the bill is too vague, and it doesn't indicate quite literally what is legal and what is illegal. There's not clear distinctions to what words are allowed to be said, what words are not allowed to be said, and that creates a lot of confusion for people, and also a lot of interpretation, which is open to the police. And we are giving the right to decide what is allowed to be said and what isn't allowed to be said to the police, who in such a situation where they are the people who are these words are directed towards, they might feel more sensitive to wanting to limit the words, and that creates a lot of dangerous situations and creates a lot more situations that will lead to more people being penalized. And the next point is that this form of speech will likely be enforced in a discriminatory way. And specifically, since these protests are in response to discrimination and in response to our very racially based protests, this law is in direct response to these protests. And creating something that's limiting this speech is clear discrimination towards people of color and people who are protesting the brutality against people of color. And so this is another form of why this law should not be allowed, since it is increasing the discrimination in the legal system. And my fifth point is that the punishment is too severe. The punishment of giving up 3 months of benefits in response to protesting and in response to speech that might be considered as violent or offensive is not equal to the crime. And it is very harmful to these people to be giving up such benefits to such an extreme, and it can cause a lot more problems for these people's families and for these individuals as a whole. And now to respond to Tom's points. Tom was saying that this will lead to more violence, but by getting rid of this middle ground, by getting rid of this protest middle ground, it is more likely to make people feel unheard, or that their opinions are not valued, and they are more likely to jump to violence. And that this will, for Tom's next point, that this will discourage people from wanting to become police officers, or that it is not showing support to the police. The police are responsible for these limitations, which is more likely to reduce respect. If people feel like the police are limiting them or hurting them or taking away their rights, that is more likely to cause people to not support the police than what the police are doing as of now. And I think that was Tom's last point. So in whole, I would like to say that this bill is not something that we should promote, since it is more likely to cause the limitation of amendment rights. It is very vague, and it also, the punishment does not match the crime. Thank you.
You did a really good job. I smile when I hear good debating, even if I'm losing. I would invite students to make comments. In the next 5 minutes, I'm hoping Noah and I can reflect on what went well and what could have been done better in this debate. And it's probably mostly going to be my praise of Noah that you'll hear for the next 5 minutes. But if anybody has comments, we'd love to hear them, and we'll mention them in our discussion. I wanted to start out by pointing out a few things that Noah did effectively. First of all, her legal analysis is very sound. It's always surprising to me that high school students can do some of the stuff that, I see a majority agrees with Noah's points. Oh my gosh, well,
Everyone.
yeah, Noah, looks like the class likes you better than me. Well, I'm gonna kill the broadcast right now. This is humiliating. I'll mention a few things that I think you did well. First of all, the way she enumerated her points and made distinct points left you with the impression that her argument doesn't just rest on what we say, a slender reed, but rather has a broad base of alternative and independent arguments supporting it. And I think that's very effective, whether you're arguing in front of a jury, in front of a legislature. I think it's great when you can array your points so that the audience sees many independent points. Second, I thought you were skillful in inhabiting the mindset of the protesters. I was trying to get people to think about the mindset of police. And you said, why are police so sensitive? You know, and our students have also commented they ought to be trained for this, right? And so you shifted the focus to what I think is a better place, the people who aren't police. And you defeated me, I think, by helping make the debate more about non-police than about police. One final thing I'll concede that you did very well is you refuted my points. I already knew what you were going to say.
Well, you didn't ever get a chance.
Well, now you're being charitable. I kind of knew what you were going to say, and I didn't try to refute your points. And I think because you refuted mine, I think the audience reasonably thought at the end that you had the better of this debate. What do you think? And I'm not looking for praise because, frankly, I don't even believe the things I said. But what thoughts do you have at the end here? We have about 3 minutes before I want to maybe talk about sale offerings this summer. But what are your reactions after this debate?
I think that it went well. I think that you also did a good job making your points very clear as your opponent. It made it very easy to follow along what you were saying, and I'm sure
Very easy to trounce me.
the people listening, it made it very clear what your points were, which is really important. And then I think normally in debate you would have the opportunity to respond to what I was saying, but I think that without that you did a very good job presenting your points.
Well, I hope everyone who's listening will realize that this is not an abstract discussion. I think we sometimes feel, and I think a lot of the audience is in Oregon, although when we taught sale on campus, we had a student from Guatemala. We had people from 3 states and also from Guatemala. So I don't know where the audience is, but assuming a fair number of the audience is in Oregon, don't lose sight of the fact that these issues are very real in your community. I mean, Portland, for example, has some of the greatest protest activity, and by greatest, I mean most frequent, involving the most people of any community in the United States. And there are all sorts of bills that are being considered and sort of policy decisions for local governments about how to respond to what is sometimes peaceful protest, what is sometimes violent protest. I am not saying that the bill we discussed today is a good one. I don't believe it is. And I made it a little worse than it really is, but still in its actual form, it's not that great. I just want all the students to know your voices are important. In a state the size of Oregon, students, even high school students who have a strong view of what the law should be can really help to influence the law. And at the local level, you can help to influence ordinances or local rules that govern police conduct. Now I'd like to look ahead to what's going on this summer. Laura, should we just dive right into what we have in mind, or would you like to mention more generally what is going on this summer?
Great question, and fantastic presentation, both of you. I'm impressed with all of the clarity and points, and now the segue into talking about summer programs that SAIL offers, are free programs for students from across the state of Oregon and beyond, as Tom mentioned. But I want everyone to be able to take debate now. This was just incredible. It's such a You know, whether you do it in the summer programs or you do it in your schools, I highly encourage for your professional and leadership development. Public speaking is one of the best skills you can get in your tool belt for, like Noah mentioned many times, showing off your confidence. And so, fantastic job to both of you. And yeah, summer programs will be the last week in July, the 26th through the 30th. And we have many, many different programs that will be available to students. And Tom and our Professor Leininger and Noah will be running the debate program this summer. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Well, I'm going to ask Noah to describe it. I always like to have high school students involved as much as possible, not only in participating, but also in thinking in advance about what we should address in a sales session. This is going to be the first time a high school student has really planned comprehensively a sales session from start to finish. And Noah's going to be the one doing that. So while I'll be involved, Noah's really focusing on the angle that we'll cover in our debate session. Noah, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we're still working on the curriculum definitely, but we're hoping that this year for the debate program, we'll be able to put a little bit of a twist on it to make sure that it's very activism oriented and helping students learn about different ways that they can use debate skills and use resources in order to make a stand and make their opinions heard throughout their community. So that is the angle that we're definitely going to be trying to take this summer, along with teaching debate skills and going in more in depth about what debate is, and how it's used in different situations. But that's my goal for the summer in this program, and I'm really looking forward to leading it.
Well, I think it's going to be great, and I hope students who are watching this either live or watching the recording understand that when we do it this summer, everyone will be involved, what's called synchronously. So I assume, Laura, is this correct, that our goal is to have as many people as possible participating at the same time? And
Yes.
Whereas in this session, I think a substantial number of people are just watching the recording, our hope for the summer is that all of you will be involved as the session unfolds. And I just wanted to mention right before we quit, because we have 1 minute left, our overarching goal is to get you excited about college and about the path that college could present for you. Law is very much a part of undergraduate education at the University of Oregon and to some extent on other college campuses, and debate is very much a part of the student experience in college. So if these two things excite you, definitely be planning to go to college, and we'll give you more experience in these two areas over the summer. But if you have any questions in the meantime, here's how to contact me. My last name is Leininger, Lininger at UOregon. So my email address is at UOregon.edu. Now, if you know how to contact Laura, she can forward an email to me, but I'd love to be a resource for you. And if you want to contact Laura or Noah, why don't you do that through me or through Laura? We probably shouldn't be giving out high school students emails over Zoom. But the whole goal is to make it easier for you to think about your future in college. So thank you for watching today. Laura, any parting comments?
No, we just appreciate you both so much, and you will be broadcast across the state. Hopefully, many, many students will be showing up in your classrooms and your debate groups. So,
well, Laura, can you edit this so I don't get beaten so badly in the debate? Maybe take out some of her good arguments so it seems like.
Oh, Noah's going down in history. You're
You can call this presentation like, are you smarter than a high school junior? The answer would be no.
High school students rule. That's what this is. Yes. Oh, thank you both so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. We'll be talking.
All right, thanks.